Hi, my name is Jason Denise. I'm the Science and Maths Coordinator at Tennyson Woods College. The aim of this presentation isn't to teach you how to do the maths, but it is here to help you to be more confident in helping your students to do their work. So let's get started. Now you might see when you look on Facebook, a whole bunch of things pop up in your feed saying that schools should ban homework, that homework is bad, and that kids need to be playing all the time. And that's true to a certain extent when we're talking about primary school. But if you look more closely at it, really they're on about stuff to do with primary school, not high school. A long-term study in the UK has found that really for students to get some good results in science, maths and English, they need to do homework every night. And they really need to do at least 2 hours of homework to get the best results. This study and others I'll have linked below if you're watching this on YouTube, so you can click on them so that you'll have some ammunition to take home to your kids. So the agenda here is I'm going to go through 9 different things which I think are important when it comes to doing homework and getting the best out of our kids. So the first one there, don't panic, attitude adjustment and parent-student connection. We'll get right into that. When I surveyed parents recently at an evening where I presented this, the results came back that people were confused by maths, they were a bit scared by it, they found it had changed a lot since they were at school, and it's normal to have those feelings. We're not all doing maths every day and we're not constantly exposed to it like a maths teacher is. So it's okay to admit that we don't necessarily know how to do everything all the time. But for a lot of us, we have been there at high school. We have been able to do it in the past, and it doesn't mean we can't coach our students through it. As teachers, we want to have our students in the learning zone most of the time. Now, this diagram is pretty famous in educational psychology, and it comes from, they call it the proximal zone of development. That's where we want to be, in this blue area here. We don't want to be sending home homework necessarily that the students are totally comfortable with. Because really that's just repetition of stuff they already know how to do. We don't want to make it so that they're in tears and you're getting stressed. That's them in the panic zone. We want them to be in this zone in the middle where it's challenging but achievable. So to achieve that end, here at school, we are embarking on, or have been for some time now, embracing a growth mindset with our students. And this has come right through from the primary school up into secondary school. And the basic idea behind this is that if you have a fixed mindset, it is that if you can't do something, you'll never be able to do it. And if you get feedback that's negative, you're really going to take that on board as being, well, I can't do it. Whereas the other side of looking at it is to look at it from a point of view of, growing from our challenges. And that when people give us feedback, we can use that to get better in the future. And it's like a lot of business people have said, they've had 10 failures before they've had a success. And that's the way we need to approach life. I hear this all the time from parents, and we really need to put a stop to it. So don't feel too bad if you've already said it, but we want to avoid any sort of conversation in this vein here, because when you're saying that you're not any good at maths or you never did well at it at school or whatever, really, I mean, the kids are pretty smart. They do biology, they learn about genetics, they know that they get their genes from you, and if you say you can't do it, then they will believe that they can't do it as well. And I think we all want that our children to do better than us in all aspects of life, to be happier and healthier and even better at maths. So let's try and avoid that, because studies have also shown that the attitude that students have when they go into a test is very important. You can pause this and read this if you like, but basically it just says that if you go in with a good attitude versus a bad attitude, it can have up to about a 30% make it about a 30% difference to your results. And so that's got nothing to do with how good you are at maths. You could get twins who are both excellent at maths, and if you talk one down and you talk one up, the one who has a better belief in themselves is going to do better. And it's a bit like that saying, if you aim low, that's where you'll end up. We want students to be as confident as they can be, and we want them to believe that they can do it. And if they do, it gives them every advantage. So to that end, we need them to trust us. You need to foster that connection from a young age. And if you're listening to this and your child is already in year 11, it's never really too late to make rules, ground rules about sharing homework. I often hear that my son or daughter doesn't show me what they're doing, or they tell me that they've got no homework and I just don't know. And well, I mean, the onus is on us as parents to make sure that we are involved. We are the adults in this equation, and I don't want to tell you how to parent your kids, but really, if you have consistent expectations from an early age, from when they start getting homework, that they are going to do it, they're going to talk to you about it, you're going to, over dinner you can say, oh, what are you doing? And they can explain it to you, then you will have a good basis to go on with in the future. So if you can't say, I was never any good at maths, what can you say? You have to try and couch it in positive terms. We're looking for growth here. And you might be able to say things like you don't remember how to do what they're doing right now, but that they'll be able to work it out. We're trying to point them in the right direction of finding the help as well. I'm going to look into that a little bit more. They need to be praised for what they do well, but we also need to be careful when we are giving them praise. There are a few studies out now that saying when we say that someone's intelligent, say, gee, you're really smart or you're really clever, all we're telling them is that they don't really have to work very hard to do stuff. So it's better to praise them for things that when they're showing they've got a bit of grit or determination, a bit of persistence and perseverance, and they're putting in the effort. And I think if we praise them for that, then they'll see that that's the path to success. But I would recommend going through to read some of that research, and again, you'll be able to find this underneath the video. So on to point 2, what is a good work environment? And in this picture here, you can see that looks really lovely. I think I'd probably be a bit distracted by the outside, but it's a nice, clear, pleasant area. And let's face it, most of our houses don't look like this, but we need to have an area where they can work, where there's not too much clutter, not too many distractions, and we'll look at that a bit of that problem right now. So I didn't mean to give you any maths to do, but here's a little bit of maths to do. See if you can work out the answer to the following problem. I'll give you a minute to have a go at it.
Click, click, bang, bang, and you're never gonna be the same. Click, click, bang, bang, and your heart starts beating like the pouring rain. Click, click, bang, bang, and the blood says goodbye to the veins. Click, click, bang, bang, and you're never gonna see me again. Everybody wants to save you. Yes, I know, and I sure do thank you. Why can't you love like you ought to? Well, I'm not sure that I want to. Click, click, bang, bang, and it all goes away. Nothing left but a memory of a love that used to be, and my heart's a tombstone, mark the rest of another unknown. No name, just a final saying, written in the right. Click, click, bang, bang. Everybody wants to save you. Yes, I know.
So how was that? Did you get the answer? No, of course not. And that's a reality. Our kids are swamped in a sea of electronic devices. They've got social media coming out of their wahoos. It's really out of control, and we need to, as parents, help them to make good choices when it comes to this. So I'm going to give you a little bit more research here about what science says about multitasking, because students will be able to say, oh look, I can do this and I can do the work as well, and it doesn't really cause me any problems. But that's not actually true. Here's a good one. In an experiment, they got some kids some undergraduates, some older people, who were taking an accounting course to do some texting. Some could text and some couldn't text during a lecture. Unsurprisingly, what they found is that after they had the lecture and they took a test on the information, the students who texted scored significantly lower in the quiz. And that just makes sense. You can't be doing one thing and another thing at the same time. You're not going to be taking that information in. Even more convincing, I think, is this study, where they got some students to read quite a large piece of work. One group used instant messaging before they started reading, another group used instant messaging while they were reading, and the third group, they read without any instant messaging at all. And what they found, that there was, the people who were reading and messaging at the same time took between 22 and 59% longer to read the passage. Now that doesn't sound that amazing. I guess if you're texting, it's going to take longer. But this is actually after they took out the time that the students spent texting. So maybe they took 10 minutes of texting in there, but they took that 10 minutes out and they still took, half as much time again to read the work compared to the people who didn't do the texting during the reading. And so what that shows you is that, your brain has to switch gears going from one task to another. And, they're focusing on a message and then they're trying to read. And so they're trying to pick up where they were in a paragraph and so forth. So it's not really surprising when you think about it that way, but I think the size of the effect is quite big. They've given a name to that. It's called continuous partial attention syndrome, and I think we all have it. And, you've probably been there where you've been on the phone to someone and you've been on a computer at the same time. The people on the other end will probably get pretty annoyed with you because you're not really paying them full attention. This also applies to music. So they've done studies as well. Listening to music is going to have a negative effect on your ability to do your work. In this example, they tested it in 5 different scenarios. Students were doing work in a quiet environment with steady state speech, which was, I think, the word 3 repeated over and over again. With changing state speech, that means a variety of words repeated or said, one after another. With music that the students liked and with music that they didn't like. And what they found was that there was no difference between the test scores of those who liked music, disliked music, or were listening to changing state speech, and that they didn't do as well as those who were working in a quiet environment or with the steady state speech. And to explain the difference there between the result for the changing state speech and the steady state speech, if you think about it a bit like listening to an air conditioner, eventually you sort of you filter out the droning sound of the air conditioner, and that's the same for a repeated word. But when there's anything that approaches conversation, your brain is trying to make sense of it. And the same goes for the music, which had lyrics in it. Your brain, whether you're thinking about it or not, is trying to make some sense out of it. Now, keeping in mind, this is a study, which means that it's, averaging results for lots of different people. Maybe your children can work better with music on. But it would be interesting if they could do some honest reflection on that and to get them to try doing similar tasks with music and without music and to see whether they go better with one or the other. So, as mentioned before, the phone is a distraction. You should set up a basket or a shelf or something like that in the house where the phone goes during homework time. So if homework time is allocated as between 7 and 9 at night or whatever, then during that time they don't have their phone with them. Perhaps you allow them to have a 5-minute break every hour where they can grab a snack. At the same time, they can, flick through all their messages and make sure they're not feeling like they're left out. But not having a phone with them, because 99% of the time they won't need it for their work. Likewise, unless they're actually completing an assignment on a computer, for maths homework where they're doing work from a text, they do not need a computer. That is another source of distraction that can be removed. And in some houses it might mean just turning off the Wi-Fi as well, although then that interferes with your own Netflix viewing, so perhaps that's not the best idea. And no TV. I mean, sometimes I will mark work in front of the TV, but I do that knowing full well that it's going to take me twice as long to do it as if I were doing it without the TV. You can't pay attention to two things at once. So I hope that gives you a bit of an overview of what sort of environment the students should be in, and if things have started to creep in your house where kids are allowed to have the computer and the phone and all these different distractions on while they're doing work, try it without it and see if they get through their homework quicker. Okay, well, at our school we use a set of textbooks by Hazy from years 8 through to 12. And there's a few reasons for doing that. One is that they're a South Australian company, so we know they're going to be targeting our curriculum really well. And also there's that continuity from one year to the next, so students know what they're getting when they get into them, and if they understand how to use a textbook in year 8, then they should be able to apply that through the years. So let's have a look at some pages from some textbooks. On the left over here, we've got the year 8 text, page from the year 9 and the year 10. And straight away you can see there's that continuity from one year to the next where they are really learning the same skill, relearning it. And there might be a little bit more complexity in the second year. So for example, in year 8 here on the left, you can see that by the time it gets to the harder questions down the bottom there, they're already doing harder ones in question 1 in year 9. But we're giving them a bit of a reminder here of what they have to do. If you look at the start of any section, there's usually a green box, and that has in there important words and concepts that they have to understand. We'll often get them to note them down and maybe highlight important points. Then after that, there's a little bit of an example that goes with that. Then we end up with the examples that precede the questions. And from left to right, you can see they get harder as they go across. And that mirrors the fact that questions get harder as you go through them. So that is a good way for students to see how something has been solved. Not always, sometimes I'll admit the examples might be, if they don't have a good foundation, they might find it hard to decipher it. But it is a good place to start. And over here you can see again, this is from the Year 10 book. We start off looking at these numbers here, and over here we've got one with a square root in it, and then there's a square root down in this one over here. So again, getting harder as you go through them. There are also these little notes that they want you to, I guess, take on board. So they put them there in a different way, just so students maybe get that little bit of a tip as well. And then you can see an example. That example then would lead on to question 2. That's all well and good, but what if your son or daughter has said they've tried to follow the example, but they're checking their answers and they're not right, okay? Firstly, have they read the question correctly? It's very easy to misinterpret what a question is asking, and maybe it just needs a fresh set of eyes to look at the question and to say, okay, what do you think this is asking you to do? And maybe you can actually clarify that for them. Have they transcribed the question correctly? Maybe they've tried writing something down, but instead of a 2, they've done a 3, or a plus instead of a minus, or an X instead of a Y. This happens really frequently, and then that will mess up all of their working. And thirdly, it's easy to look at the answers in the back of the book, and when you can see here, they're quite dense, there's lots of stuff in there, and they could be looking at the answers for the wrong section. And without a word of a lie, in class, when students are stuck on something, when they don't know why their question's wrong, it's usually one of those 3 things. Students also have to make sure that they don't get bogged down. If they get stuck on a question, they should move on and go to the next question. And in particular, if, say, they're doing question 1 and they get halfway through it and they can't go on any further, try question 2, because sometimes it's actually testing a different skill and they might understand the next bit better than the bit that they were previously doing. So it's really frustrating as a teacher when you set some homework and they get to the second question and stop, but you know full well that they could have done the 5th question, for example. So they need to go through it all and see if there's something that they can do, and then email the teacher if they don't understand. Sometimes, it's a number of days between one lesson and the next. So if they've tried their homework that night and they are stuck and they don't go any further, well, that's where it stops. But if they email their teacher or come and see their teacher during the daytime, we can straighten them out and then they can continue on with their homework and get it completed before the next lesson. I'm going to show you a couple of helpful resources now that you can use as a parent. First up, all of our students have a subscription to Your Tutor. Some people make great use of this. You log in of a night time and it runs you through, it puts you in contact with a tutor who is a real live person on the other end of the text box, and they can help you through questions, and they can do them on the screen for you, show you what you have to do and get you back on the right track. Next we have the Khan Academy, and Khan Academy was founded by this guy, Salman Khan, who's pictured, and a couple of years ago, or a few years ago now, he was helping out his, I think, a nephew who lived on the other side of the USA, and he was doing that by posting videos on YouTube to explain different things to him. Now, it wasn't long before other people stumbled on these videos and found them very helpful, and before long, he thought, well, I could actually do a lot of good doing this, and he quit his job, and I think he was doing quite well for himself, quit his job and just started making videos full-time. And it wasn't long before some of the big companies in Silicon Valley took note of this, and now he's got the backing of companies like Google, who host his site and provide a lot of the engineering support for him there, and it has enabled his thing to grow. It's enabled his idea to grow into something much bigger. So it is free, and I'll drag it across here. Let's see what it looks like. I'm logged in as my daughter at the moment, but you can see I've got her set on, she's doing 2nd grade work. She's in grade 3, but Second grade matches up with us, I think, pretty well. It's a US curriculum, and she's almost all the way through that, and then I'll set her onto the third grade work. And if we have a look here at what the questions are like, I'll just click on third grade and show you. So she gets into here, and you can see there's practicing different tasks, different skills here. On the left, these boxes here, dark blue means that she's mastered a skill. So she's mastered using groups of 10 and 100. And if she starts a mastery challenge, for example, then she gets the opportunity to work her way through questions. She gets to do all 6, so 6 times 5. And if she gets that right, I'll do one for her. There we go. Check the answer. Great, okay. And then she moves on to the next question. If you get it wrong and you're not sure how to do it, you can go for a hint here. And if you haven't learned it at all, you can go, I haven't learned this yet. Also, for a lot of the more tricky things, this is relatively easy. For the trickier things, there'll be a video down here, one of the videos that MacCann has made, which actually works through how to do it. So I know of a couple of students who really actually like this as a way of solidifying the things they learn in class. We'll leave him behind for now. The next thing I've got to show you here is Simon. That's the learning platform we have at school where we put things on for students. And the students can find things in the general document area where we might put in task sheets if they've left theirs at school. They'll find test preparation materials, that sort of thing. Of course, all their results are in Simon. And sometimes too we put in media resources. And this depends really on how tech savvy the teacher is and how comfortable they are in doing this and how much time they've got. Like, for example, these videos, I made these at the start of the year before we really got into it, but during the course of a term, it's usually too busy to be making stuff like that. But, I've put them on there now, and they'll be there next year and the year after. So it's a resource that we're building over time. And for those of you who like something a little bit more physical, this is a great book that I've stumbled across at Woolworths, and I've seen it at Kmart as well. Not Woolworths, Big W, sorry. $26, and it is really great, step by step, through everything you really need up until probably getting towards the end of year 10. So, you could have this hidden in your room, and when little Charlie or whatever his name is doesn't know how to do anything, you can go and have a quick look and come back and they'll be none the wiser. Okay, so if you don't understand what your kids are doing, how can you tell whether they're doing it right or if their work is good? So we'll just have a look at a couple of examples. These are from some Year 12 students of mine. And now, can you guess which one's a girl and which one's a boy? Yes, the one on the left is a girl. And you can see it's super neat. There's all these sorts of flourishes, like up here, she's done a fancy title and that sort of thing. And, part of me thinks, well, is that a waste of time? And I think in her case, for her, it gives her a chance to, exercise control over her work. And for her, it makes her feel like she's achieving something, I guess. And everything else here she's done really well. She's numbered her work, so it's easy to refer back to. The only thing is she's only ticked off one thing here, so maybe she needs to go back and just check off everything else as well. It's pretty messy over here, but saying that, this graph, for example, they've actually put their points on it carefully and they've drawn the line with a ruler, so you can see where it crosses over. They're still labelling their work. I mean, in terms of communication, it could do with a little bit of improvement, but it's not too bad despite looking a bit scribbly. The maths is still good. Again, we've got a girl on the left and a boy on the right. It's not always this way, but you tend to find that girls do have better fine motor skills. I don't know why, but they tend to. And this work on the left is really, really great. They've, underlined the end of a question, so everything's spaced out. They've been really precise with their graphing. And, it looks like they're working down the page as well. They're even putting in things like therefore symbols, so they're being very thorough. And then on the that one there, again, messy, but looks like they're being pretty accurate with their work and they're labelling things. And I like this one over here actually on the right because you can see that they've made a mistake, but instead of using whiteout to get rid of it, they've crossed it out, and you can see they've actually fixed it up here. It looks like actually there wasn't a lot wrong with their final answer, but they just wanted to go through and I guess make it clearer for themselves. You can see they've changed a couple of things. So that's great. We'll encourage them not to rub out any mistakes they have. Keep them there because then the teacher can look back at what they've done. also over here, they've made a note to themselves about what it is they're actually doing here, which is really great when it comes back to revising. So yeah, keeping the mistakes is a good thing. On the other hand, if they're drawing this on their page, then that's not ideal. So, again, you can get distracted even without social media, so that's something to watch out for. So here's a bit of a checklist for knowing how to help your child, perhaps when you don't know how to do the work. Are they working down the page? Have they ruled some lines down it? And also, are they ruling straight lines when they're doing graphing? Are they using a pencil for their diagrams and graphs? Are they numbering and labelling all of their work? Are there answers in sentences if it's a word question? That sort of question where a family buys 3 tickets at this price, another family, you have to answer saying the price of the ticket was this or whatever. Then we get down to the operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now, sometimes we may not understand how to do the overall task that the students are doing, but when it's a multi-step task, sometimes from one area to the next, you can actually see if they've made a mistake with their addition or subtraction. Can they tell you exactly what they are doing at each step if they're working? If they can't really explain it, they're not really getting it, and you need to encourage them to talk to their teacher, because they might be just following it stepwise from previous examples, but not really understanding what they're doing. Are they checking their answers and ticking them off from the back of the book? And again, are they not getting bogged down? Are they keeping on working through? So now, just looking at that addition subtraction bit, you can see over here, you might not understand exactly what's going on here with these inequalities, but when you get down to this point, 10 divided by 10 is 1y, 60 divided by 10 is 6. So if they had 60 divided by 10 and they had a 5 on that line, you could pick it up. It does take a while to get your eye into those sorts of mistakes though, so maybe you wouldn't see it straight away. But again, over here, 20 divided by 2 is 10. And if they'd made a mistake there, you might be able to pick them up on it. When we get into the upper levels of high school, they start to get some quite meaty investigations that they need to do. We call them folio tasks. And no joke, I've had folio tasks that have been 36 pages before, which are a nightmare to mark. Fortunately, they've changed the rules on that, and we're expecting students to be a bit more concise and to get it done in a fewer number of pages, and I can show you what that is a little bit later on. The most important thing with any extended sort of homework task and investigation assignment or whatever is that they need to start early. There's no point leaving it, if it's a 3-week time frame that they've been given, leaving it to the last night and then being in tears because they're not quite sure how to get it finished. They need to start it early so that they can uncover any problems that they're having early on, get help for it, and fix it. Here's an example of something that we've used with our Year 10s just recently. It's really quite heavily scaffolded this so that they can take it on, they can do the work without too much trouble. And that's because we're trying to get them into, I guess, some good work habits and also getting them into knowing how to write a report for a folio task. And so you can read through these with your son or daughter and you can say, have you done this bit, have you done that bit, and so forth. So here, there's just a little bit of background, and then it tells you what the sort of mathematical tasks are that they have to do, and it really quite heavily scaffolds that. In this section over here, for example, it shows them which buttons they have to press on the calculator to do it. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. They'd have to struggle to get that bit wrong. And then after it's shown them how to do the maths, it sort of says how the report should be set out. So we've got an introduction to start with. And then on the next page here, you can see that that's when they put their mathematical procedure in, which is what they were learning about on the previous page. Discussion and analysis. This is really so important that they put a lot of time into this, because really doing the maths is one part of it, but actually working out what it all means and working out whether the methods and the models they've used are actually reasonable, what the limitations are and what assumptions that they've made are really, really so important. And then a conclusion, which sort of makes a statement about what the overall solution or conclusion is. And if I go into the next bit here, this is the assessment rubric. These differ from place to place, and even in the lower secondary, they can be a bit different from one task to the next. But in this one, you can see that for their mathematical skills, they can get a maximum of 3 marks. So, like I said, getting it right is important, but it's not everything. The analysis and interpretation, and then the communication of the information, they're worth 6 if you look at both of those. So if they're not clearly outlining what they're doing and what analysing their results and talking about what worked well and what didn't work well and for what reasons, and how could it be improved, that sort of thing, then they're not going to get a great mark. And then there's a bit there for organisation and being able to work independently, which means without too much assistance from other people. So again, that's out of 12 marks, and which isn't a lot. We need to interpret that to give them a grade from A to E, and really it's a lot of it's about being in the fine detail of analysis. Here we have a Year 11 task, which is stage 1 in SACE. And you can see that it's been divided up into different parts, and this really lends itself then to a student giving themselves their own deadlines to get through each part. So the day they get this, they could say that, okay, well tonight I'm going to do part 1. I'm going to do this research that I need to do and find out the meanings of these words. And if they do that, then they've made a start on it. And making a start on a large assignment is really important for getting things going. So they do that, and then they say, okay, well, by the end of the week, I'm going to have parts 2 and 3 done as well. And they can get it done then in a good amount of time without being stressed at the last minute and doing an all-nighter. Here you can see we've got the performance standards. This is how we mark stage 1 and stage 2, and it's the same for all the SACE subjects, except the words in here would be different, but the concept is the same. So for example, we're looking here at their knowledge and understanding of concepts and relationships. If their work is comprehensive, we'd highlight that one. If there's some depth of knowledge and understanding of concepts and relationships, we'd highlight that one. And if they had limited knowledge of understanding concepts, we'd highlight that one. Then we go through and we highlight all the others too, depending on where they fit from A to E. If it's greyed out, we're not assessing it for this task. Once we've done the highlighting, then we look at that and say, okay, most of them are in A, some of them are in B, and okay, this then would become an A. And that does depend on how we weight some of these. Some things we might give a bit more weight to because they are about the analysis and logical conclusions and knowledge and understanding. We might give communication slightly less of a weighting at the higher levels. When you get to Year 11 and 12, there are prescribed maximum lengths for papers. So in stage 1, they'll never have to do more than 8 pages for a folio if they're doing the hardest maths, and doing the harder maths in stage 2, 15 pages maximum. Now, because you have worked with your son or daughter from a very early age and you've built that trust and that relationship when it comes to mathematics, and they share stuff with you and you're interested in it, then you are going to be proofreading it for them at some stage, and you're going to insist on it. Some students really don't want their parents to see things because they don't feel, well, it comes down to shame really, I guess. They don't feel they're very good and they don't want to feel judged. But again, we have to look at it from a growth mindset that really you're there to help them and they can get better with that help. So you need to be able to proofread it. But it still has to be their work. So with the proofreading, you can pick up things like typos. If something doesn't make sense at all, you can just say, look, I don't understand this. Or if they're repeating themselves, or if they've contradicted themselves, or if you can see that they've missed out a section that it has on their task sheet, then let them know that. But for some of you, your job might be actually to do writing. Maybe you write, you work as a personal assistant, or you work as writing reports for some things. We don't want your work, we want their work. So please don't rearrange their paragraphs, radically, or write sentences for them. That's still their work. But you can just help them with typos and other things like I mentioned before that have been left out. Now, in the upper levels, students get a draft that they can hand in. So they can hand this in, there'll be a due date for that draft, they hand it in, and it has to be the full thing. Sometimes they won't take this date seriously enough because they think, oh well, I'll just hand it in with the final thing. But they're really missing out on getting some feedback from their teachers when they do that. They don't get the quality or complete feedback that they would get if they handed in really a complete piece of work. And then when they get it back from their draft, then it's really easy for them to just finish it off and do the things that the teacher suggests to get it in by the final due date. If they don't get it in by the final due date, then they run the risk of getting a 0 for their work. They really need to have some sort of medical exemption or notes from parents, a really good, if there's been a family crisis or something like that, it needs to be negotiated with the teacher and perhaps with the head of school. So that's the folio tasks out of the way for now. Preparing for tests, okay? Now, I like to say to my students that I'm the coach and they are running a marathon, not a sprint. So they can't, cramming might help a little bit just for like details at the last minute, but if they're staying up till 3 in the morning to revise for a test, they're really not going to be at their best. So to get away from that, they need to do work regularly and go back over the stuff that they have already done. Here's an example I've got here. This is not from a maths class, this is from a biology class, but I thought it was too good to miss showing you this. And you can see that this girl has rewritten important notes, and I know for a fact that she's got some of this by looking at other videos from other locations and just finding other information out there. And she's gone through, she's rewritten notes, and she's highlighted important parts. And what I really love also is that she's got this book and she's got these little tabs through it as well, so she can go back and revisit things. And that is the ideal. That's what we're all hoping our students are going to do. They're going to actually be organised and prepared and have that written down and to go back through it. So the other things that students can do when they get closer to the test is do the review sets. This is again one of the features of the text. At the end of each chapter, there are sets of questions that go through all the parts of that chapter. In addition, they can go back and redo the difficult parts of the text, the bits that they were a little bit iffy about, because as it is, the textbooks are huge. There's no way that they would get through every question. So often when there's multiple parts, we ask them just to do every second letter. So there's plenty of questions they can go back and do that they haven't done. And in any event, they can probably redo some questions they've done already because they won't have remembered them by the end. Keeping in mind that, again, coming back to that sort of target diagram before with the zone of proximal development, they need to be doing challenging things to be learning. They should revisit some of the things in the comfort zone because things do move across from here, and as we go on, the too hard circle should shrink and the comfort zone should get bigger as the learning zone moves outwards as they work through harder and harder things. In year 10 to 12, they can bring notes in with them into a test, and they should prepare them ahead of time so that they can use them when they're revising, and that way they know if they're of any use to them. If they don't use them at all when they're revising, then maybe they were not much good to start with, or maybe they just know it really well. So to make one of those, they should go through the chapter, get all the important parts out. Keep in mind that us teachers will from time to time say, this is something great to put on your cheat sheet, and we will tell them, put it on your cheat sheet, and they should make a note of that when that happens. And putting examples on there, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but putting examples on sometimes narrows their thinking. And so they then try to shoehorn the questions in the test into their example. And, that doesn't always work. They really, ideally, need to understand the work they're doing, not to try just to follow an example. Here's a cheat sheet that someone prepared for one of my Year 12 classes. And you can see they do have some examples, and I guess, that gives them an overview of what that should look like, and they've gone through how it was worked out. But they've also got things up here that they write answers in sentences, show or working out, check answers by adding back into the equation. So little tips that they've put back in there. They put some definitions in, they've worked out, here's some steps for problem solving. So, they've put a lot of stuff on. And sometimes it becomes an exercise in how small can a student write? And I guess that's again why they need to, once they've written it, use it for revision so that they can find things on it really, really readily. So despite all the work, sometimes they're going to get really stressed, and we need to be able to manage that. And the best way of solving this is prevention. So as mentioned, they need to be organised. They need the right environment. So that means, not the phones or the computer and all that sort of thing. If we do that to start with, that means they get through their work on time, they're approaching it, taking it on as it comes, and not leaving it till it's too late. They're not stewing over their problems. Because they have been doing their homework as they get it, they've been uncovering those problems, and they've got help when they need it, either in person or through email. They've got to keep everything in perspective too. A D on a test is not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. they need to look at what they did do and didn't do in the lead up to that test, and they need to remedy that before the next test or the next assignment. And you know, we've all made it through high school, all of you who are listening to this right now. So you know, everyone goes on to be an adult and get a job eventually. It just depends really if they're going to be meeting the potential that we want them to meet. Now, the other hard thing is really balancing all of the different needs that a student has in their life. They've got so much else going on. And sometimes as a family, it might actually come down to the parent who has to say, you need to take fewer shifts at work, or, you know, you need to take a break from gaming until all hours of the night, or, you know, if you're dancing every night of the week, are you going to be a dancer or not? And do you need to be putting more time into your schoolwork? That's something that you need to sort out as a family. The other thing that can cause stress is if the student is not in the correct class. So, and by that I mean in years 10, 11 and 12, there are different levels of maths, and you have to be placed in the right place. We want to be challenged, but we don't want that to be to the detriment of everything else. So you can see on this graph here, if the maths you're doing is too hard, you could be putting in, you know, maybe this is 2 hours of work a night and you're still only getting a C on these arbitrary scales. Maybe if you drop down to an easier maths, you could be doing 2 hours of work and getting an A. So that's something that you need to work by talking with your teacher and the counsellors at school. Every year we do counsel students into their subjects in the second half of the year. And we do encourage kids to push themselves, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. There's often a perception of need, and maybe sometimes, oh, my mum did the hard maths at school, so I need to. But what are they planning on doing after school? And just to give you a bit of an idea here of the different levels of mathematics, Essentials Maths is aimed at vocational, retail, people who aren't going to go to university. Great if you're doing an apprenticeship. It'll give you lots of great skills to use there in everyday life. And you know, you can get an ATAR for it as well, but it's not likely to be as good as if you do a harder maths if you want to go to university. General maths is for university courses with non-specialised maths. So for example, that'd be suitable for law or an arts degree or psychology or something like that. Methods, then we're talking more computer science, engineering, some of the sciences, not all, more of the physical sciences, the harder sort of health fields, and of course if you're going to do maths at university you probably need to do maths methods. And then specialist, really that's for engineers and physicists and people who are doing maths at uni. I mean, if a student loves maths and they do so well at it, you know, then it doesn't matter what they're going on to. They should do the hardest maths they can because that's just for their overall benefit. But if it's a chore, if they're spending 80% of their time on maths to the detriment of their other subjects, they're not going to get the best ATAR anyway. So they're better off moving back from, say, methods to general. A lot of questions come up then about, well, is the general maths going to be worth less points than the methods or something like that? And the answer to that is, well, a C in methods is still not as good as an A in general, or even a good B in general. So it's really more important that they do well in the maths than it is to do the harder maths, depending, of course, on what they want to do when they get to university. Anyway, that's the end of this presentation. If you have any questions, then you can email me through the school, or you could always put a question at the end of this video and I can try and answer it for you. I hope it's been helpful.